All right, welcome back to FYI, the For Your Institution podcast presented by Mongoose. I am your host, Gil Rogers, and today we're going to continue our coverage of the new FAFSA rollout. We thought we had this conversation put to bed as data was starting to be transmitted to institutions, but this is higher ed. Nothing is as we predict. And so now I have Joel Bauman, who is the Senior Vice President for Enrollment at Duquesne University on today. Joel, you want to say hello?
Hello, everyone.
How you feeling today, Joel?
It is Monday, and oftentimes you've heard manic Mondays. We call it Mack Truck Mondays, when all the voicemails and emails have come in over the weekend, and all the requests have piled up. So we use Mondays to do catch up.
There you go. Well, and I don't mean to take this whole situation lightly, but sometimes all you can do is just kind of throw your hands up and laugh at the moment. But this is, we're in a serious point now where I'm gonna read the tweet from NASFA, and we'll kind of go from there. This was from last week as of this recording. The US Ed Gov announced today that a miscalculation in the formula of the FAFSA resulted in incorrect financial need information for several 100,000 students being sent to colleges and universities. And then, of course, there's the full statement, and we'll put a link to the full statement if you haven't read it in the episode notes for the podcast. But Joel, I reached out very shortly after this was posted. You made some very astute comments about kind of how institutions are kind of challenged to navigate this scenario. So I'd love for you to kind of give us your high level perspective on the challenge that we're facing right now, and we'll kind of go from there.
You bet. I should say that this particular Monday, we are greeting all the piled up information and this latest announcement with a lot of energy in our reserve tank, because we were all celebrating the Duquesne Dukes basketball team making it into the round of 32 for the first time in 50 years. So one of the reasons we weren't answering emails on the weekend like we normally do was we're out celebrating the accomplishments of our basketball team. So that's been kind of fun. Having said that, yesterday was also an admitted student day, our first admitted student day. We have one in March. We try to do one before Easter, and then we're going to have another one on April 13th. What was fascinating, and I decided to present at the there's always a financial aid session for families. Right. I decided to do that myself along with the team, because the team has been working like the Dickens in answering all these questions and trying to convey a sense of whatever sense of lessened anxiety to the families, and letting them know at each and every step of the way where things are. So I needed to give them a break. Also, and I wanted to get a sense from the families myself, because I can ask questions that maybe the team may not be as comfortable, because it may be more direct to the families, whereas I can, given the fact that I've been doing this for a really long time at 4 or 5 different schools, and can give them that vantage points from multiple states. Also, because I've got 3 daughters, 2 of whom have completed this process, and my youngest is a freshman currently here at Duquesne. And so we are living, I've done the old FAFSA and I'm doing the new FAFSA. So I thought I can give that perspective to the families from actually being a current parent. Mm-hmm. The latest news was sort of, people are kind of sanguine now about of course there's a new wrinkle in this, and does it affect me? And if not, all those families that it does affect, and we're all sort of in this together, how much more information can I organize and glean in order to make the best decision? Mm-hmm. Right? So they are, maybe the word is shell-shocked, but they were, and I did 2 sessions. I'd say there were about 200 families between the two sessions. And they were sort of singularly sort of sanguine about all the schools are going to do this. There's some schools that have given me some information. There's some schools that have given me some advice, but at the end of the day, we're all going to wait for X, Y, and Z to happen before we make a decision. We are trying to analyze what this means for our population. Our understanding right now is that 200,000 number that they threw out there is not evenly distributed among schools. It's not evenly distributed amongst the applicants. It's dependent students who have an asset indicator in their FAFSA data that suggests it may change the SAI calculation. We're actually right now, since that just came out, we're going back and saying, what would have that done for us last year? Like, how many of our students actually, because we can't test our current FAFSA files because we just got a few, right? So what would that mean for us? And right now it seems to be that calculation, and I could be wrong. I defer to a lot the other financial aid experts out there in the world who have their thumb on this. It seems to me it's unevenly distributed towards the higher income brackets of where this gets reported. So I think that depends on the kind of school you are and the kind of population you've got, and the kind of students you serve, as you would expect through all this story. And that actually made me think about also this post I put out there. And I'm not the first one to notice this, and I'm not a crusader, but I did start thinking about the haves and the have-nots. I did start thinking about well-resourced institutions that have the staffing, that are in urban areas, that have, pockets reserve of expertise, that have the ability to get remote work in and attract talent that way to serve the students, and the ability to analyze data in real time in a quick way, and have technological support and expertise to use these systems, and we're an Aleutian Banner School, to get answers to these questions to be better serve the students. So that just started to, and then thinking about, I have a group of colleagues, we've been in this business for a long time together. We have these colleagues, we can reach out to them and ask questions. We can reach out to them for their advice. And it just strikes me that even though the national organizations, NACAC, NASFA, NASPA, have all reached out, have all recommended extending deadlines, you could see this in the sort of zero-sum gaming theory approach. If you check the NACAC deadline extensions, who's saying undecided, who's saying case by case, who's saying that because that's all they can do, who's saying that because they want to get a sense of being able to somehow massage the pool, the applicant pool, or the PR, and who actually can wait or can extend.
Yeah. So let's take a step back, and I'm gonna read your post back to you for our viewing audience and listening audience, and we'll put a link directly to your LinkedIn and to this post in the episode notes for our listeners, so they can comment and engage and share with it as well. But here it is in my best Joel impersonation. No, I'm just kidding. It is, oh boy, starting to keep me up at night. How can we as an industry and collective of all who care about our students come together and better serve our families and the currently not well-functioning, quote, system, without being accused of collusion and running afoul of antitrust issues, and not succumb to competitive zero-sum thinking?
Grow your student community, help them stay, and encourage giving with Cadence, Higher Ed's premier engagement platform from Mongoose. Designed exclusively for higher ed by higher ed professionals, Cadence helps you engage your audiences with the perfect balance of AI and personal connection. Talk to students, parents, and alumni on their time and how they want. Empower your staff with integrated text and chat inboxes that gather all conversations in one place. Reach out to learn more about how our best-in-class service, support, and integrations have helped colleges and universities like yours have smarter conversations. From text to chat, make every message count.
I'll give a little history lesson for our listeners, for newer admissions counselors who might be new to the space. NACAC for forever had the standard practices that were generally accepted by colleges and universities around national candidates reply date for May 1st, around incentives for early commitments, a number of issues and challenges. And then a couple of years ago, federal government came in and said, can't do that, antitrust, anti-competitive. And so we had to back off of those as kind of our rules and regs and have more of guidelines, right? Which is kind of what they were anyway, but it's kind of reframing things and making it so that we're not, as an industry, becoming anti-competitive. I mean, you go down this road of, there's other industries where there's price fixing and there's issues of access, and we do have issues of access in higher education, and there are challenges, but you have to look at these things in the spirit in which they're created, right? And so now we're in a situation where if we had the ability to say, okay, we're going to have every college in the country adjust, but it's not that simple, right? Because everybody's got their own budget deadlines. Everybody's got their own, desires for prestige and access. And so I'd love for you to kind of go further to those points of what, wave a magic wand, perfect world scenario. What are some things that we could and should be doing? And maybe some things can be done. Maybe some things can't unless it's a school by school basis. But given us, obviously the FAFSA was supposed to be, a simplified process for students, and we, what the narrative that I've heard through the various conversations that I've had about this topic over the past few weeks is, this is a one year glitch, and it'll be easier for families in the future. But the families that are going through, and I've said this before, the families that are going through this process now for the first time are the same families that were impacted by COVID and remote education and shutting down of the world when they were starting high school, right? And so you've got this population of students that we need to step up and support in a better way, right? In a different way, because it's a different class than we've ever experienced before. And so with that as kind of the tapestry, Joel, what are some things that you think that are on your mind, and things that we can think about to better support families and avoid that kind of zero-sum game, race to the bottom thought process that we're kind of driven to and pushed to sometimes?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, in higher ed, again, we're all, despite all the different budget positions, marketplace positions, locations, needs, right? So as a reminder, you remind us about the NACAC question and around the May 1 deadline and the antitrust. The other antitrust case that lingers over all this, and I could see why institutions and risk management suggests, is that 568 group financial collusion finding. So I can see why the system is a push me, pull you, as that famous Dr. Doolittle character was. That's where we are at an institutional level. On the one hand, we want to support students. On the other hand, we cannot bring to bear our shared interest and shared responsibilities, and share resources to support in a global way. So what would work? Why do we need to know and drive decisions by families? On a Pollyannish side, on an optimistic side, it's because there are real needs to plan. There are course. If you don't have a deep bench of faculty, if you don't have a deep bench of student services, right? You need to plan your housing inventory. You need to plan your course schedule. You need to figure out which faculty to hire and which programs. All this depends on having a sense of your entering class. If you're a school that counts on that, if your school, again, haves and have-nots, where you can pull up resources as you need in real time, you're not as anxious to find out that information. So here's a fantasy approach, and there are all sorts of consortiums. What if we as a collective said we need to support our students, and I do need to know about course sections, and I do need to know, maybe those of us in a region can get together and say, actually, let's quickly come up with a revenue share program where if you're missing name X class, biology and biology labs, let's all have, and then we'll help support your students. You help support our students. We'll have a different schedule, right? There's just ways that we've never been able to talk to each other because of this. Would that be somehow colluding? Would that be, or would that be supporting each other? And wouldn't the families be appreciative of not having to make a decision under duress? Because, as you identified, the whole last 4 years has been under duress.
Yeah, and I think that's the issue, right? Is that we try to encourage or force institutions to do things that are quote unquote right for students, but then we don't allow processes that would actually support them better, right? And I think and now we're in a situation where we on one hand, the challenge was always trying to encourage students to make commitments earlier and earlier, right? And that was part of the issue and the challenges with early deadlines and the pushback we get is like give the students as much time as possible. But now you're almost in a position where with May 1st kind of coming up, the students are going to get their package later and later and later. Now they have even less time on the front end and the back end, and they're kind of in a rock and a hard place situation where, like you said, they're waiting to hear back, and because institutions have taken different approaches to supporting their students and maybe not have communicated about it because they can't or they don't want to because of competitive issues, et cetera. And I know one of the prior guests that I had on about this topic was Emily Coleman from HAI Analytics. And one of the things that they do is they support institutions with financial aid modeling and predictive modeling and budgeting. There are many companies that do it. And before we hopped on and started recording, you were sharing some thoughts about how many institutions have outsourced their financial aid work because they can't find people to do the work or people don't want to do the work. But one of the things that I remember that we've talked about a couple of times here is the issue of the predictability and the issue of using your data for supporting enrollment decisions. But when that deadline is going to be a week after a student gets their package versus we were being criticized when it was a month before or 2 months before, right? And so some schools have done slate forms, some have done CSS profiles, some have done their own in-house kind of built up program to provide at least an estimated package. But everybody's handled it differently. So now families are being, they're kind of, they can't compare apples to apples right now, right? And so what are, I guess, message to the industry and message to families? I just made a mess of all of these things and outlining all these different challenges, but I think that's a reflection of kind of where we're at right now, right? Is what do we do next?
Yeah, it's sort of like the higher ed financial aid version of the multiverse movie. What is it? The everything everywhere all at once happening. So I would connect the following sort of Venn circles or follow the bouncing ball. I'd encourage everybody just to go look at the NASFA jobs board, the National Association of Financial Aid Administrators. I would then urge everyone to download a copy of the NASFA benchmark 2023 study and read the executive summary. You don't have to go through the whole thing. And I think it's a clarion call to the kind of underappreciation of a financial aid into expertise, the financial aid staff, financial aid experts in their own right, and professionals in their own right as an industry and within each school as well. So I connect those two dots. Then I connected again back to the resourcing question. You talked about predictive modeling and you talked about which system could be adapted to do the sort of support of giving information to families so they could start to address a decision-making pathway, right? So it's not so much they'll be able to make a decision, but there's a time path of some information where there's a range of possibilities. So it's not a complete surprise or unknown. There's a range of possibilities. The range of available federal aid there's a range. For those of us that have state grants, there's a range of possibilities. It's not right. So we can start letting families anticipate plus or minus. Before moving here to Pittsburgh, I was in Florida for a while. And as you all know, those spaghetti diagrams and the cone of possibilities, and it could land here, it could land there. It's not going to land in, Houston tonight, but it's somewhere over Pensacola. So we need to be able to give most of us, if we can talk to a family, can give them that cone of probabilities and give them some sense of where it's going to land. Those schools, again, that have the resources, both on the K-12 side for the advising and support, and on our side, have been working with these folks, and so they know what these ranges are. It's just a question of which piece of the Rubik's Cube gets turned to make it whole. There's not a lot of options left. But for those families, and again, with the FAFSA situation, it's those families in need most of certainty, in need most of information, that haven't had these privileges, is exactly who's now missing the information and will need to make a hurried decision. And I think from the families that I saw, those folks in that situation, they may not make a decision, and it's going to be a national undermatch.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a little bit of irony to what you've said about how the families whose data was, I guess, most quote unquote compromised, I'll use the best word, with the miscalculations, were likely the families with lowest level of need. But now this issue that's been the delays and all the glitches and everything else is negatively impacting first time lower income students who are in need. And so even when there's even when the families who are in less need are the ones their data is impacted, that's still going to negatively impact the have-nots to many extent, right? And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. And I think the hardest part, and this is where I have so much empathy for the families who are impacted in this process, is that even if every institution sent them a uniform, they got a table where they could just compare. Let's pretend there's a world where they just get one table that's unified and it's consistent across all the schools they've been admitted to, and it just has side by sides, but they're all estimates and could change. They still can't make a final decision until they actually have the final results, because those schools that are close, they like you said, they might undermatch based on the fact that they are more comfortable with how it's positioned, right? And so everything becomes now a marketing problem. And that's I think the challenge that a lot of institutions are kind of, cross-referencing with themselves, is supporting students, but also still marketing to them and keeping them engaged in this process. And because at the end of the day, there are still more institutions that need to get the work out there to get those enrollments in than the ones that can be okay if they lose a few because the financial aid process was messed up for them, right? And so it's a challenging process.
It is a challenging process. The further irony on this, version of what else can go wrong. It is the same year that there's all this murkiness for students and confusion, where we're about to implement the Financial Value Transparency Act, which is designed, to your point about a universal, spreadsheet, to give families as much transparency and information on the financial value of the education and availability of financial aid to make informed decisions. So there are multiple sort of ironies here, and I think I don't know that there'll be a reckoning. I just think I think everybody's sort of aware of, boy, this is just it's complicated. All kidding aside, really complicated. 6-8 months from now, there'll be many more people eligible for Pell, and that's going to be a good thing. It'll be a much easier FAFSA to fill out. I filled it out this year. I did notice a difference, and that's a good thing. But much like the COVID echo, have we just missed this year of families that are dealing with this, and this the issues with the technology, will it echo through the next, is this now a generational impact? Just like
Yeah.
COVID and learning, is this now a generational impact that we as an industry need to address, right? So all of us are going to have FAFSA nights, and all of us are going to go out and message about how important it is. But how is it okay for families to get, how many schools are going to do search and buy that particular name and send them stuff about fill out the FAFSA, right? So 50, 60, 300 separate emails about a FAFSA versus a unified, organized, more efficient approach that all of us don't have to spend the exact same sort of resources multiple times.
Thoughtfully nurture applicants, personalize retention efforts, and exceed fundraising goals with our Cadence Engagement Platform's text messaging solutions. Designed exclusively for higher ed by higher ed professionals, Cadence helps you engage your audiences with the perfect balance of AI and personal connection. We leverage an intuitively designed interface and easy-to-use texting templates so you can have targeted conversations or scale up to expand your reach. Our powerful smart messaging can respond automatically, exactly how you would. And to measure progress, track your campaigns with unparalleled reports and analytics. Effectively meet your community where they are as we proudly feature an industry-leading 95% read rate within 3 minutes. It's never been easier to make every message count.
So I think that you just brought up a really good point, and this will be my last kind of segue through all this thing. But remember back in the day, it was the American Dairy Farmers Association did the advertising campaign, the Got Milk campaign, right? It was like, it wasn't one milk company that paid to have that campaign run nationwide to get people to buy and drink more milk. Everybody kind of paid in to this campaign to raise awareness because they understood that, a rising tide raises all ships, right? And so I think there's a certain, and you go back, we'll go back to what you mentioned earlier. We have our national associations, NASPA, NASFA, NACAC, that are all, encouraging institutions to do certain things. What if those associations did a national campaign of some kind to encourage families and students to is that collusion? I don't think it is. If the association is doing it and everybody pays in through that way, and that might be a smarter way, like you said, versus going out and buying 20,000 names and doing an email blast to try to get and change. And again, the messaging is going to be all different, the positioning is going to be all different versus that unified approach. Maybe a crazy idea.
If I put my position, you use the word positioning. So if I put my positioning hat, I'm going to say, and to all my colleagues out there who've ever had a FAFSA night or financial aid webinar, we can position that to identify all the distinctives and signature programs that are unique to Duquesne University education and how we address the financial aid process. Having said that, I'd love that opportunity versus having to just to your analogy, do we have FAFSA? You got FAFSA? That, I think, would be where the Department of Education, as part of that 50 million concierge service, they could do a service to the whole industry and say, we have a FAFSA night. We're a neutral party. We have reach that nobody else does. We have access to information that nobody else does. And we could leverage just to those families and in those spots that need the most help. And then, right, that's neutral territory. Then we can all go in and say, now that everybody's got, base level, let's talk about what's unique about our institution. That would be fantastic. Where we can be individualized and serve the students that we serve and with our mission. I mean, obviously, Duquesne has a Catholic mission and a Spiritan identity, the only Spiritan university in North America. So we have a certain way of talking about how we approach financial aid and how we finance and how we serve students in particular kinds of families, right? Those on the margins. So that's where we need to be spending our time. And that's the impact. Again, the situation impacts our ability to serve our students in the best way possible, to get our story out while we're backtracking and have to do some of the basic work with some not as many. And by the way, we're a pretty good resourced institution. So I think our endowment is up to 600 million at this point. So I get the privilege that we're at and the resources that we can bring to bear. And yet,
Yeah.
right, there's those that can do more and those that can't, that we'd love to help.
Yeah, and I think that that's a great point. That I don't think the responsibility should fall on higher ed institutions to encourage students to file the FAFSA. It should, especially in this cycle, that PR and marketing campaign should presumably be taken on by the government at this point, based on kind of the impact that the rollout glitches, the timing, and the delays have had on this. So anything that can be done to broaden that reach and broaden that message, so you're getting that, and then it's just a matter of, do they send you their FAFSA versus sending it, or versus not, right? And so I think that's the piece that is, but you've already got you've got the information on the students you need FAFSAs from. It's so there's a certain element there, at least for this cycle. And I know we can go down a whole rabbit hole of students who send the FAFSA who hadn't applied yet, and how you handle that in the process. Those are separate conversations and issues. But at least for the students who you've admitted to the institution for this fall, you have their information, right, to contact and ensure that they do. But it's a matter of getting them to actually fill out the damn form, right, is the important piece. So Joel, I appreciate all of your time this afternoon, and congratulations on the team's performance in the tournament. And we hope that you have a great rest of your week. Any closing thoughts, and best ways for people to get in touch with you if they want to continue the conversation?
Yeah. Closing thoughts are, let's get out there and support the women's basketball team, who's in the second round of the NIT, the women's NIT. So we're going to be pretty busy and excited about rooting our teams. But yeah, I think from my experience of, the face-to-face with the families, right now, the takeaway is, be very aware as you work with these arcane and complicated systems, that your staff are people, your financial aid staff especially. And I want to shout out to them who are working really hard and with limited staffing. And I also want to suggest that the admissions offices around, and I'm sure we're not the only one, the admission staff has jumped in and learning as much as they can about financial aid to help with the overlap and help support the team, and then the families themselves. So I just think a giant dose of empathy and attention to the people we have on campus and at the other end of the Zoom or phone. Just to remember that and start with that, and then go to that next step as we work through the actual technical system.
Awesome. Well, Joel, we appreciate your time again, and we'll put all of the appropriate links for our listeners in the episode notes. And we will see you all next time on FYI. Thanks.